If you follow me on Twitter, you may notice sometimes that I'll post a series of screenshots from news articles, and the only comment I'll provide is that I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to spark a flame in your heart. Is that the lyrics? And this is a reference to, it's a song. It's a good song, by the way. It's really old. And it's from the intro to Fallout 3. If you're not familiar with Fallout 3, it's a video game about a post-apocalyptic future and nuclear war wipes everybody out. So it's just my reference to the good old collapse. Which brings me to this morning segment. Seattle paramedics left teen to die in chop zone lawsuit. Okay, let's think for a second. Seattle paramedics, the city, they're being sued because when Antifa set up their autonomous zone and they didn't allow the city in, several people died. One person was shot not in the vital organs several times, like hands, buttocks, arms, and was bleeding out and died because of it. Because the cops and the paramedics could not get in and couldn't respond. They're blaming the city, saying, well, you should have gone in anyway. Okay. Now let's take a look at what our good friend LeBron James is saying. He tweeted, I fueled the wrong conversation about Ma'Khia Bryant, and I owe it to her and this movement to change it. Thank you, Fabio Lacienes, for educating us about Ma'Khia and her story and why this needs to be about her. All right. So they're mad when cops don't intervene and someone dies, and they're mad when cops intervene and someone dies. Look, there's no solution here. What we're seeing, and the reason why I opened with the Fallout 3 reference, is that the only outcome is absolute collapse. And pay some homage to V for Vendetta. If you're looking for the guilty party, you need only look in the mirror. We have no sense of community anymore. We have no sense of duty or responsibility. Not us, probably, for the most part. I think it's fair to say that you can criticize me for not doing certain things, or, many watching probably aren't doing enough. But maybe it's a bit too, hyperbolic at the very least to say that we, those who are actively paying attention and trying to solve the problems, are the ones causing the problems. Okay, the average people, the people involved in these stories, need only look in a mirror. LeBron James linked to a story from Vox, which is one of the most ridiculous bits of sophistry I've ever seen. And therein lies the problem here. I'm going to read to you about the Seattle paramedics, but I want to get into the hypocrisy and the untenable circumstance we find ourselves in. Vox writes this article, straight up saying Ma'Khia Bryant was wielding a knife and charging a woman. What do you think would have happened if the cop did nothing? Perhaps we would get this story. You see, the cop intervenes to stop a knife-wielding woman, and now he's a murderer. The paramedics and the police do not intervene to save someone who was shot and killed in a drive-by, and they're responsible. If no matter what we do, Black Lives Matter will scream and riot, and the mainstream media and the establishment will support it, I got to say, whether it's intentional or not is irrelevant. Whether the Democrats are trying to make this happen or not is irrelevant. It's happening. The dominoes are falling over. The system is being ripped apart, and it seems like no matter what course of action we take, they will scream and freak out. Unless, of course, we end up with an actual far-right, fascistic, authoritarian type who just tells them to shut up and starts locking them up. But I'm not a fan of that either. That, to me, would still be collapse. A loss of our freedoms in exchange for some security. I'm a bit pessimistic about what's happening. And, shout out to Michael Malice, who has said, don't be blackpilled. These people are fools, and paraphrasing, things of that nature. It's not about being pessimistic because there's a group of, people taking over the seats of government. The pessimism is that the system is rotting to its core, and there's no way to secure the foundation at this point. Maybe the best thing we can do is find our communities. Maybe you should read Atlas Shrugged. Maybe go found your own Galt's Gulch. Just get away from the cities. It feels like the collapse is inevitable simply because the structure that holds up our society has rotted to the core. And what can we do about it? Now, granted, these are two different jurisdictions, but you can see how the national media handles these things. I think it's inevitable. I'm not trying to be pessimistic. Maybe it's just the dominoes falling over. We can see it. Here's the story from the New York Post. A teenager was left to die by paramedics on the cold, hard ground after being shot on the edge of Seattle's autonomous zone. Notice of claims filed Wednesday allege. Lorenzo Anderson, 19, was shot several times on June 20th last year, right outside of the city's Capitol Hill organized protest, CHOP, a 7-block autonomous zone that sprouted up amid Black Lives Matter protests after the police murdered George Floyd, the claim states. At the time, The area was overrun by anarchists. Not true. I reject that. Get your facts straight, New York Post. And self-appointed security guards who were policing the area with semi-automatic weapons and wouldn't allow police to enter after 10 p.m., the claims state. Okay. So the claims are stating that. They're not anarchists. Anarchists come in a variety of fashions. You have anarcho-capitalists who are like, leave the state out of it, don't hurt other people, let's freely trade with each other and take care of ourselves. And then you have left anarchists who are like, let's not have anyone be in charge and let's negotiate and cooperate with each other. Unfortunately for the left anarchists, it very easily devolves into authoritarianism. So maybe these people come out and they're like, I'm an anarchist, I believe in mutual aid. And then a week later, they realize they have to force people to work and they still think they're anarchists. So that's probably where that comes from. They're not. They say after the police curfew, a 911 call came in for the shooting of the special needs teen. At the time, a Seattle Fire Department ambulance was approximately 2 blocks from the crime scene and police were stationed about a half mile away, the claims allege. But instead of rushing to save the special needs teen's life, they didn't respond immediately. The fire department previously said they couldn't respond because it was too dangerous without a police escort, which didn't come until 2:39 a.m., about 20 minutes after Anderson was shot, the claims allege. Good. Good for the paramedics. They owe you nothing. You want to set up an autonomous zone? You want to have armed guards and no rule of law? I am under no obligation. No one is under any obligation to go into your space, which you are in control of, and threatening people. It ain't going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You know, I've got family. My dad was a firefighter. I understand. I've heard the stories. I've not been on these calls myself, so maybe understand isn't the proper appropriate word, but I've heard the stories firsthand. When they would pull up in an ambulance or a fire truck and there would be a bunch of armed gang members standing around, they're going to be like, nah, sorry, dude dies unless you leave. And these guys would be like, we're not leaving. It's like, okay, well, we're going to take off. We're not getting out of our car when there's a bunch of dudes with guns standing, gang members. People are committing crimes. So often these guys would run away and leave, and their friend would be bleeding out. That's what if you want to break the law, you want to operate outside the system, this is what happens. Granted, at this point, I'm very pro 2A, but I'm referencing like gang war violence where people are shooting at each other, not just simply bearing arms. The Post says, quote, for close to 20 whole minutes, Seattle Police and Fire Department communicated with dispatchers on separate radio channels, communicated the wrong locations, and miscommunicated the procedures for providing medical attention to Lorenzo. Meanwhile, 19-year-old Lorenzo lay helpless on the pavement, bleeding to death, while 911 calls continue to pour in. I love this. I'm being facetious, by the way, when I say I love it. The people in the chop, the people who are LARPing like moron children, watching a man bleed out, going, quick, call the police. Too bad. You did this. It's your fault. Setting up your stupid barriers, your stupid LARP guards with your stupid LARP garden, and then someone gets shot, and you go, quick, now we need the police and the paramedics. Call 911. No. You get what you ask for. It's an old adage. You get what you ask for. They say that in sales. You go up to somebody and you say, I'm going to sell you this car. How about you give me $1,000 for this used car? Well, you get what you ask for. That's what they say. These people didn't want cops. They didn't want city services. They wanted their own autonomous zone. They put up their stupid little signs, now leaving the United States, or things like it. And then when someone gets shot, they go, quick, help, help. There's one video where people are leaving a police brutality protest where they were calling for abolishing the police. And one of these guys throws something at a car. And then the guy in the car jumps out with a bat or a machete or something. And they go, quick, call 911. No, 911 should not be responding to these people. I'm sorry. It's not about leaving them to their own devices in the sense that I want them to be suffering or in pain. I just think people have the right to opt out. If you're like, I don't want your services, okay, well, there you go. I suppose it's a taxation argument then, if you have the right to opt out of certain things. That's why I'm very interested in the school choice voucher program idea. You do got to pay, but you get a voucher. You can choose where you want to go. Anyway, long story short, if people say they don't want cops, the cops should be like, you got it, buddy. We're not going to waste our time somewhere where we're not wanted. Well, there you go. They say he lay helpless on the pavement, bleeding to death, as 911 calls continue to pour in, with bystanders begging authorities to send help. I know that we set up the zone to eject and oppose you, but please come in now. Why? So they can get shot? No way. As Lorenzo's pulse faded, volunteers performed CPR while other bystanders were on the phone with emergency dispatchers. receiving conflicting information about how to get Lorenzo into the ambulance once it arrived. The Seattle EMT was less than a minute away from Lorenzo as he bled out, and the Seattle police were less than 5 minutes away from him as he bled out. Essentially, Lorenzo was left to die. If I were the city in this lawsuit, I would say, Your Honor, we agree with all of the assessments made in this lawsuit. 100% yes. The city states unequivocally he was left to die. Absolutely. And then when the judge is like, why? Well, he wasn't in the city. So the city has no obligation to respond outside of its jurisdiction. That's right. They declared an autonomous zone. We respected that. It was no longer the city of, the city of Seattle. So sorry, right? If that's what they wanted. Oh, but they're LARPing. You see, we can't have it both ways. We can't have a system that cuts loose Antifa in these Portland riots and in Seattle when they're charged with felonies. And they're the people who are fighting cops, beating cops, and then screaming, help, call the police. This is why I'm saying it's falling apart. Prove me wrong. Change my mind. I don't think so. Maybe, the unfortunate reality is that stories like this are a bit too in the weeds. Regular people don't even know this stuff is happening. And for someone like, me and for us, we're watching these things. We understand what's happening. So I guess this is why I've been buying crypto. I've been buying gold. I've been buying hard assets. I'm not confident in this system at all. My confidence is completely gone. In fact, I'm confident the system is on the verge of collapse. It is collapsing. I don't have good long-term prospects for the U.S. dollar. I'm seeing all these stories about hyperinflation, about market crashes. I'm seeing a situation where a group of people can block a zone, an area of the city, kick the police out, and now cry the police weren't there. How can both situations be happening from the same people? These are psychopaths. And yet the problem is, well, they're granted establishment control. The Democrats pander to them. I'm sorry, this country has a sickness. The Democrats will say whatever they have to say to get elected. Republicans too, to a certain degree, but Republicans are mostly feckless and milquetoast, don't do anything. But the Democrats will just say whatever. They'll get elected. They'll do nothing. And the system just continues to erode. They say at 2:45 a.m., Anderson was pronounced dead at Harborview Medical Center after civilians transported him to the hospital. An autopsy report showed that he was shot in the hand, buttocks, knee, and shoulder, but none of the bullets hit his major organs. He just bled out. If they had went in there and did their job, I believe my son would still be alive, and I wouldn't have to be going through this right now. Well, I feel for you, man. I'm sorry that you lost your kid, dude. He has his own $3 billion lawsuit against the city. But let me just say, if you guys want to LARP and claim that this area is not part of these United States, then why would you expect local services to come in? But maybe that's just a stupid argument. Maybe the reality is, if you set up a perimeter with armed guards and tell the cops not to come in, don't be surprised when they say, okay. Which brings me to the next story. This is my evidence to you, so share this video if you agree with me on this assessment. I believe these stories, both happening on the exact same time, show us there is no possible circumstance in which the police can do their job. This is why I keep saying the cops should be resigning. The cops, many are. 700 officer shortage in Baltimore. 200 officers resigned out of Seattle. These are good cops. These are cops who are not going to sit by and abide by terror. I'm not a fan of the enforcement of illegal or unconstitutional the enforcement of illegal actions or unconstitutional law. Sure. But if the cops were at the very least neutral arbiters, or at the very least, I should say, if the DAs were, then I'd probably be like, okay, we got to reform the system. That's where I was last year. Now, most of the good cops are leaving. Okay, once the good cops leave, we don't want to create a space for bad cops. Abolish the police department. People should be responsible for themselves. Everybody should own guns as their Second Amendment right. And now we need to start bringing back personal responsibility. It's an unideal circumstance. I'm not saying it because I want, people to not have like cops. I think cops are important. I think local police departments are very important. I think they serve an important function, and the system is far from perfect, but I think we have a pretty good system relative to anywhere else in the world. But I don't want to see a situation where as all the good cops resign, and they are, and it's happened, that these roles get filled by crooked cops and woke police, which is happening. Take a look at this story. Why they're not saying Ma'Khia Bryant's name. You're going to love this. After watching 15 seconds from Vox.com, by the way, after watching 15 seconds of police body camera footage last week, viewers of various races and political affiliations had made the decision 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant was the aggressor. the fat, huge, knife-wielding attacker and maniac. Those are quotes from Vox. And deserved to be fatally shot. According to these viewers, Nicholas Reardon, the police officer who immediately shot and killed Bryant, who was holding a knife, was justified. That the teenager was in the middle of an altercation in which she was presumed to be defending herself didn't matter. Sorry. If you lunge at someone and then draw your knife back, you're not in a defensive position. Now, I think back to that video that came out of, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was, I think it was Seattle or Portland, where you got a guy with a baseball bat walking backwards, warning far leftists to get away from him. He said things like, I'll come back, I'll F you up. Sure, but he's retreating. That's a defensive position. You know, it's entirely possible that you could be in an attack stance and still be defending yourself, perhaps. But when a cop shows up, and this is what the position you're seen in, sorry, it's justified. Here's what Vox says. The cries for justice that applied to George Floyd did not ring out as loudly for Bryant. Even after it was discovered that Bryant was living in foster care, she was in the middle of a fight with older women when police arrived, and that she was allegedly the one who summoned the police for help. Some of the same people who called for justice in Floyd's case used police talking points to justify the 4 bullets that he unloaded into Bryant's chest. I mean, chest, I guess. It hit her in the back, I believe. She was brandishing a knife, many pointed out, which meant the other black women needed to be protected. Crisis response experts noted, however, that de-escalation tactics like commanding Bryant to drop the weapon, physically getting between the women, or simply communicating with her could have kept everyone alive. In many recorded encounters between the police and white people carrying weapons, for instance, officers didn't shoot first or even reach for their guns. They successfully managed to peacefully apprehend the suspect. You see the sophistry here. LeBron James tweeted the story out. The cop should have got between the women. Did you see the video? The cop is running up and within seconds, she's pinning the woman down and got a knife drawn. How is he going to get in between that? He's going to teleport? He's Quicksilver, son of Magneto, and he can zoom right in between the people with super speed? It's impossible. Vox is engaging in sophistry so that these psychotic tribalists have some moral justification why they can keep pushing their stupid fake ideology. The cop can't teleport. I love this. He should have communicated. He had 10 seconds, if that. And he yelled, hey, hey, get down, get down. It's insane. It's insanity. When the cop intervenes and saves the life, they say, how dare you? Immediately after the cop shot this woman, this teenager, you see in the body camera footage, people going, what did you do, man? Why did you do that? Could you imagine what would have happened if he did nothing? Ma'Khia Bryant would have stabbed the other woman, and they would go, why are you just standing there? What are you doing? Why didn't you shoot her? And that's the point. In Seattle, where they set up this autonomous zone and tell cops to F off, they're now going, why didn't the police come and save us? Because you told them to leave. Then in Ohio, they're like, why did the police come and shoot this woman who was wielding a knife about to stab another person? There is no circumstance in which the police can do the right job. And it's probably on purpose. I know these are different jurisdictions, different circumstances. It's not an autonomous zone where this cop was, but at this point, cops, y'all need to stop responding. Now I hear cops actually are not responding to many of these calls anymore. Good. If you're not wanted, when we're seeing this stuff, you should err on the side of not intervening. Why? At least you won't go to prison. LeBron James posts a photo of this cop. He was called there for help. He sees a woman about to stab another woman. He stopped her. What was he supposed to do? These people think these cops are omniscient. They pretend like we had we have clairvoyance. We understand what's going to happen. We can see everything around us at all times. When we go back and visit footage, as in the Chauvin case, and we can watch it for hours and hours and hours and nitpick every little detail, you'll see things that the officers didn't see. And then they'll be blamed for it. You know what? Look at everything I just showed you. The cops who don't intervene are a problem. The city's getting sued. Well, at least those cops won't be going to prison. This cop, Reardon, is potentially having his life destroyed. I'm sure he's getting death threats, all the really bad stuff. He shouldn't have responded. Kim Potter, she's the one who shot Dante Wright, a guy who was wanted on aggravated robbery charges, who was armed. And she's now I believe she was released on bail, but she's facing manslaughter charges up to 10 years in prison. She probably won't get that, but sure. If you're a cop and you can't see what's happening around you and you choose to stay in this, I don't care to defend you anymore. I don't care. Because like I said, the good cops have already left. The bad cops are going to start filling the roles the good cops leave behind. That's the reality. I don't want a woke police force, so how about we get rid of the cops? Now, a lot of people said the feds will come in. No, they won't. The National Guard will come in. The National Guard can't police the same way that cops can. So maybe, but it won't be the same. I'm telling you now, conservatives, you want to stop supporting these cops who are remaining because they're already starting to weaponize against small business owners and regular working Americans while letting Antifa go. Antifa overwhelms the system. They won't prosecute these people. They cut them loose. But if you're a small business owner who wants to sell a beer or coffee, they will arrest you like that. If you want to defend yourself from the violent mobs, they will arrest you like that. And they've done it. One of the reasons I got out of the Philly area was because I realized, and I said it on video, I said in many videos, if the mob comes to my home, I said this, if we're near the point where if Black Lives Matter comes to your house and they're throwing bricks and they're screaming, the cops will look at the mob, look at you and say, it's easier to arrest you than it is to deal with a violent mob. New Jersey, because I was in the Philly suburbs on the other side of the river, also has a duty to retreat, which means in my own home, sleeping in my boxers in the middle of the night, if someone breaks into my house and a violent mob shows up, I have to jump out my window and run, through the street with no weapon, leaving my guns in my home for the mob to steal. That's the stupidity that is New Jersey. You have a duty to retreat your own home if you can. And that meant if I'm sitting there thinking, I've got nowhere else to go, what am I supposed to do? How do you retreat from your own house? Where do you go? I guess the idea is you're better off being outside in your underwear than shooting someone. Then the violent criminals take my guns. Okay. Look, gun safes are great, which I have. They can be easily broken open if nobody's in your house. They'll figure out a way. I mean, I have some pretty good ones now, but like a small safe for your handgun under your nightstand or something, they're going to break that open relatively easily. That's the insanity that is New Jersey. That if someone broke into my house and threatened my life, and I have gotten death threats and someone tried breaking into my house, and I used my weapon to defend myself, I get to go to prison. Nah, I'm not going to live that way. And it would be the cops who would come and arrest me for it, knowing that I was defending myself. I'm not going to play that game. And I think y'all would be crazy. Is this not enough evidence for you? If the cops don't intervene, they sue the city and complain. If the cops intervene, they blame the cop. Get out of these blue states if you know what's best for you. Now, if you're inclined to vote Democrat, or I should say if you're inclined to vote for the establishment, which could include people like Mitch McConnell, maybe you should just stay where you are and enjoy the fruits of your vote and your ideology. Me? I'm going to mind my own business. I'm not gonna get particularly active in local politics because I don't want to have an impact that could make this place any way like the cities I've come from. And I think people should recognize that. If you move to a red state or a rural area and things are going well, maybe you should listen to what the locals are saying about why it's going well. There's a lot of other problems too outside of just law. I think you need to realize that population density makes things change as well. For the time being, you live in these urban metros where I did, like New Jersey. I couldn't defend myself if the mob came because the cops would arrest me. So I had no choice but to leave. No choice but to leave. And there are cops who speak up and, speaking out about Black Lives Matter. One cop in a Jersey town just got fired for calling them terrorists. She's correct. Another cop was demoted, I believe. But I'm sorry, I have very little sympathy for New Jersey cops. The gun laws they have there are one of the most insane in the country. And so for me in my own home, knowing that getting death threats, that people threatened to burn down a theater where I was putting on an event, knowing that the riots were escalating, I can't sit in this house and protect myself. I can't because of the police and because of the corrupt politicians. I had no choice but to leave. Dominoes are falling over. This should be obvious to everybody. But I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.